right. Well, in today's episode of Job Wars Tax Cut Clash, how are you? Nice to see you. President Obama versus the GOP leadership over those tax cuts set to expire at the end of the year. The subject du jour. After flirting briefly with the idea of a truce, Boehner now firmly back with his camp, demanding all tax cuts be extended, including for the wealthy. This morning, the party's young guns repeated the GOP claim that anything less will hurt small businesses.
Half of all small business income will have a huge tax increase in January. 70% of our jobs come from small businesses. So the last thing you want to do in an economy like this with 9.6% unemployment is have a big tax increase on small businesses, which is the engine of job creation in America. That is not good policy.
That's almost correct. It's actually young businesses in America and growing businesses in America, not small businesses. I could point you to the liquor store with 2 employees where I grew up that hasn't hired somebody in 30 years. And so a little of the small business rhetoric, or all of it really, in my opinion, highly misleading. Young businesses, new businesses, growing businesses, not necessarily small businesses, are the ones that create jobs. The policy in question, of course, President Obama's vow to extend tax cuts only for families making less than $250,000 a year. That's 98% of the country. By the way, the nonpartisan Joint Committee on Taxation reports that only about 3% of small businesses will feel any impact. But again, I believe the small business argument is a false argument. We need to be having a young business argument, a growing business argument, not a small versus big business argument. The downside here is that either choice with the tax cuts will add astronomically to our already soaring debt over the next 10 years. But hey, you and I both know nothing like talking tax cuts 2 months before an election. Votes is all that matters, right? So the question really is whether all this talk of tax cuts is missing the mark when it comes to the fundamental problem of driving investment and job creation in America. Didn't hear any mention of China, for instance, in today's rhetoric. Joining us now, a man who knows what it takes to create jobs in America. He is serving to this day as one of the titans of industry in our country. Dan Dimicco, chairman and CEO of Nucor Steel. As we mentioned, this is the largest manufacturer of steel products in North America. Nuts, bolts, rebar, and buildings. 12,000 employees and a meaningful voice in manufacturing with our administration in this country and in the executive community. I think that's a long enough introduction, Dan, right?
Hey, Dylan, that's plenty good. One small ad is 20,000 Nucor teammates, not 12.
Goodness, we would hate for the people to be talking layoffs like that, especially when we're trying to create jobs. 20,000 it is. I apologize for the 12. How do we create jobs in this country, and how do you close the gap between what you think the conversation should be and where the politicians are?
Well, the first thing we can do is try not to talk layoffs with your teammates. Nucor has not laid off any employee in 47 years. Okay, yep. So you don't lay people off. You don't have people looking for work. Everybody shares in the pain, and they share in the gain in good times. I wish our government and the public servants in government, remember they are public servants, would take a cut in pay and a freeze to be similar to what the private sector employees and Americans have taken. And then we could talk real serious spending cuts along with tax cuts if they're necessary. But I'm telling you, Dylan, they're missing the point. They're both right, and they're both all wrong. All right? We can talk about tax cuts. We can talk about spending cuts. But at the end of the day, there's a much bigger fundamental problem that's facing our country, and we're not dealing with it.
And what is that?
We have a problem in this country where we bought into a model that said we are going to have an economy that grows based upon services. And what have we gotten? We've gotten one bubble after another. We got major debt driving one bubble after another since the internet bubble, the Enron bubble, the dot-com bubble, the real estate bubble, the banking Ponzi schemes that took place on Wall Street, trying to create wealth from nothing. Instead, we should be doing what we should have been doing for most of our history, and that's making and building things in this country. And there's a major reason why we are not successful in manufacturing and putting people back to work today, and that's because we've ignored the fundamental issue of trade distorting practices that have been going on for over 20 years. And the last president and administration to get it right was Ronald Reagan, and nobody since has gotten it right. We have to deal with the trade deficit, which is made up of 2 components, energy and manufactured goods. When you talk energy, we need everything that we have in this country, every resource available to us, natural gas, nuclear, renewables, wind, solar, coal, oil, and technology to drive it in a clean way. We need all of that, and we need to get off of sending money, trillions of dollars overseas over the last 20 years. The second thing is manufactured goods. We got to start making these things here. We've allowed China to do what Japan did in the 70s and early 80s, and that is practice major non-free trade, trade-distorting practices, currency manipulation, massive government subsidies, predatory practices to build up their economy. But the problem is not they're building up theirs, is they're doing it and doing it in a way that we're allowing to destroy our manufacturing sector, our middle class, and we need to get back to making things. We need to have government policies that allow that to happen. We need to have public-private partnerships like we had in World War II, like we have with the Apollo program, where the government facilitates the private sector to be globally competitive, and together we drive success, together we drive job creation, instead of bickering while 25+ million Americans are out of work.
But there's a sense, Dan, that you have a division, because you have one portion of the economy that benefits to the distorted trade, the manufacturing sector, the electronics industries, the textiles industries, who are more profitable in some cases because of the distorted trade. And then you have another portion of the economy that obviously you are a component of, the manufacturing component, that is saying allowing this to go on is destroying our ability to attract money to our country or create jobs in this country. How is a politician to reconcile those two forces?
They have to do what's right for America. What's right for America is putting Americans back to work, and policies that don't support that need to be reevaluated. Okay? And there's nothing wrong with being a multinational company. There's nothing wrong with benefiting from global growth. We do that. A lot of companies do that. The problem is we've allowed the distortions in trade to go so far that they've become predatory and destructive here at home. And this is not just this president. This has been going on for over 20 years. And it's time for us to get back to the point where we say to the world, and China in particular, play by the rules you agreed to have access to world markets. Play by the rules you agreed to when you joined the WTO and got favored nation trading status. And if you don't, we're going to do what Ronald Reagan did in 1985. Pull the Japanese and the Germans in and say, guys, you're killing the goose that laid the golden egg. Back off. Your currency should be valued by market forces, not by governments. Let it float. Have a major revaluation. And that's what happened. And we had 20 years of strong economic growth after that. And that's the only thing that's going to get America back to work. Why did the stimulus package not work? Because the money that people got from that and spent went principally to buy foreign-made goods. It didn't develop the multiplier effect here at home to create jobs here at home. We are so missing the boat, arguing about all this trivial stuff, trivial in the sense of the major problem. Important in their own rights, don't get me wrong. Tax debate is important. Spending debate is important. But we are in the middle of a forest, chopping down in 20 directions, and none of them are the right one to deal with the problem that we have got in front of us. We need a bold leader to head up our country. We need business leaders in this country to come together and say, yeah, we want to profit from operations overseas, but we can't do it at the detriment of the American economy, the American workforce, and future generations of American, and we've been doing that for over 20 years.
Dan, thank you so much for focusing the issue for us so clearly today. Dan Dimicco, the boss at Nucor, and I apologize for the misquote on the head count. 20,000, largest steel producer in North America. A pleasure, Mr. Dimicco, to have the conversation. Thank you for giving us a piece of your afternoon.